Well, Brandon, thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
I really
pleasure.
appreciate you taking the time to come out and answer some questions for our class. So you're the owner now of Druffel Landscape?
It's a family-owned
It's
business.
family-owned business, yeah.
And I run it and handle most of the headaches.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll get in specifically to what you do here shortly, but you know, Druffel Design and Landscape, formerly I know it as Dan Druffel Incorporated. You guys have a very rich history and quality. When I think about, when I list the top 5 landscape design install companies in Cincinnati, no question you guys are at the top of the list.
Appreciate that.
I just have seen a lot of your work, it's good. How do you, as a business owner and as a landscape architect, maybe 2 different lenses, how do you define quality landscapes?
So I don't think that it's seen through 2 different lenses. You know, I think a landscape architect should have an attention to detail. And when you're building something, you need to know it's being built to last. I think everything that you do, when I go to sell a project or design a project, I design that based on the way it should be built. And that's when I promise something to a client, we have to deliver that. You know, and I was telling a contractor the other day, when I was younger, I was doing a huge project that was way out of my league, and I laid out the wall incorrectly, and it was 9 inches out of square, and it was a masonry wall, and it was 30, 40 feet long.
Ooh.
We tore it down and rebuilt it.
Yeah.
Because that's not what the client paid for, and that's not what's right. So you just have to judge yourself. Your reputation is we get all of our work based on reputation.
Yeah.
And we don't have to pay for marketing dollars. I look at that wall as that's my marketing dollars.
Yeah.
So if I can make sure everything that we do, I can sleep at night, and I won't have to worry about the client calling me and saying, hey, I just discovered our wall's 9 inches out of square. Why is that?
Right.
And you know, I think that's, if you can stand behind what you built, then you're in good shape.
You sort of answered the next question I had for you. It's around how quality drives what you do. But if you could drill down a little bit more on that, it's more than just fixing a wall. In order to deliver quality, quality starts all the way back at the very start of a project. So talk a little bit about the lens you look through when you start a design project. What are the quality aspects that you're looking at as you work through that process, all the way through putting it in?
So I'm a big believer that the landscape design should reflect the architecture of the home. So I believe that you know, and I think it helps tremendously when you're doing a design, if you've got guiding principles. You know, if you're designing this garden that calls for formality because the home dictates it, it's easy. You lay it out based on those ideas. And you know, when I do a French garden, it's much different than if I'm doing an English garden. And you know, that helps me as far as production, because then I can stick to these principles and run with it. And the clients usually love it, and it feels balanced once it's installed, because you know that was the vision of the architect, and then I'm just carrying that on through the landscape.
Next few questions, I want to kind of focus on you as an individual, and then we'll kind of pivot back to landscape architecture and the whole design install aspect of horticulture. Why did you choose to work as a landscape architect and now really as a business owner that not only designs but installs the work that you design?
Well, the reason I became a landscape architect is because obviously we had a family business. You know, my dad was a landscape contractor, and growing up I was exposed to that. However, from a very young age, I was always interested in architecture. I think had we not had a family business, I probably would have been an architect.
Oh, wow.
In retrospect, I'm very glad that I'm not an architect, because for the most part, most architects are designing CVSs and unexciting things, whereas every day I think I mean, even if I'm working on a small project, I get the opportunity to really enhance something through landscape. As long as it's properly maintained after we put it in, you know, it should look great for years to come.
What type of training did you go through to become a landscape architect?
Well, I went to college and got my degree in landscape architecture. While I was in college, I worked for my dad on the cruise, which was hugely beneficial to me because I was able to understand and see how things actually work and how things are built and how difficult it can be to do things. So I know when I'm designing, okay, that's very challenging. Maybe I should par that back because the budget won't reflect that. And then after I graduated from college, I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked for a multidisciplinary design firm for several years. I came back and worked with my father for 8 years, and then he retired and I took over the reins.
Wow. Talk about any professional organizations that you are involved with or have been involved with that have kind of helped you in your career as well.
So I've during school I had some great opportunities. I took a studio class from Mike Lynn, who's a famous landscape architect. And I also got to study abroad. My teacher abroad was very influential to me. And then since graduating, I'm involved in the ONLA. I'm on the board right now.
Oh, wow.
So that's been beneficial to me in the fact that, one, I've created great connections, and two, it's given me a understanding of what all our industry has to offer and how I can best utilize all the facets of our industry to make my business more successful. I've also been involved in the Midwest Landscape Network, which is probably the most beneficial to me because I get to get together with a group of local horticulturalists monthly, and we discuss how to run our business, what problems are we having, and it's really just a open table of guys who are highly successful and have been doing it for a very long time. I think our oldest member is 82, I want to say, and he's been at it, Delhi.
Oh yeah,
He's been at it for a long time. So Kruger Maddox as well. So.
I think that's key. That's one of the things I've tried to convey to people that are looking to get into the horticulture industry. I've only worked in 2 industries, horticulture and education, so I don't know a lot of other industries, but one thing that I've noticed about horticulture, maybe a little bit better than education, is the networking opportunities are tremendous. The majority of people in this field are willing to share. Just like you're willing to share with us your knowledge. There's just a willingness to share that information, and it sounds like you took advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, I would say that the attitude by and large is we're all in this together. And everybody's willing to learn. I would say that Kevin Odell is one of our biggest competitors.
Yes.
But I could call Kevin and say, Kevin, I'm having this problem. What should I do? And Kevin would give me an open and honest opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Pivoting back to your company, I knew your dad. I had done business with him 20 plus years ago when I worked at Cincinnati Pine. And even back then, we bought some trees from Double D Plant Farm. And that's where I met your dad at the farm one day. This business has evolved a lot since your dad started it. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution? And then in your answer, talk about what were some of the things that drove that change as it evolved?
And so my dad started his business when he was 16. So he was chasing a lawnmower for a lot of years, or not for many years. I think when he was 21, he got his first big planting job, which was like, I don't know,
done cutting grass.
10,000 plants of euonymus
oh my goodness.
over on Edwards.
Oh wow.
So
they're probably still there too.
No, they just knocked the house down, and it was a beautiful tutor, but that's beside the point. So then, he started to understand, hey, this is scalable, and he started hiring. He was always hiring people for his mowing business, but then he started, he had basically a mowing business and a landscaping business, and he started to grow, and then he got into, he was doing lawn fertilization and all that, and then I think he was like 28, and he was doing, a client asked him, hey, can you get somebody to do this for me? I said, oh yeah, sure, anything. So he gets this subcontractor to do a project for the guy, and my dad just did it all for him for free. And my dad was like, well, that wasn't smart. I spent a lot of time doing this and I didn't make any money. So then he realized, hey, I can do this for people. I'm highly organized and
Yep.
I understand construction. So he started subcontracting a lot of business, and he started to get into some pretty big projects, renovating pools and doing new pools and
Wow.
all sorts of, wall projects.
Mhm.
And he was using outside subs
Mhm.
so that he could deliver a high quality. Our philosophy is that if you're laying patios one day and you're pruning shrubs the next and installing a landscape the following, you're probably not going to be great at any of them.
Right.
So we try to focus on horticulture.
Yeah.
And then, when I came into the business, I wanted to capitalize on the reputation that my dad has built
Mhm.
and try to um, minimize the number of less than desirable calls we take.
Mhm.
My dad would, if anybody would call, he would jump and he'd go tackle that. And I realized that my dad spent his entire life chasing those calls.
Right.
So I'm trying and failing and doing less of that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to elevate our brand to a higher level, and that's been one of my focuses since he's retired. And then just take our business to the next level and make it feel the end experience feel more polished.
Well, that's one of the things that really struck me when I learned more about your business, that you're not building walls, you're not laying paver patios, you're focusing on the horticulture, but you're almost functioning as sort of the general contractor of all those other pieces. And I think that made me excited about what you're doing, because you're really focused on quality horticulture. I mean, we're sitting in one of the gardens that you designed today, and just the plant selection and how the materials are put together, it's very apparent that that's part of what drives you and what you do in your business. So that's really, really cool. So you mentioned this early on, it's a family-owned business. What I want people who hear this to walk away with is I want them to kind of understand that, working for a family-owned business is going to be very different than, say, working for a large corporation. It's just a different atmosphere, different world. What's that like running a small business? Because some of the people watching this, some of the students will probably want at some point maybe want to hang their own shingle and do their own business. So talk a little bit about what that's like running your own business, and then also in your answer, talk about some of the strengths or maybe even challenges of doing that.
Okay. How much time do we have?
Yeah, right. We have plenty of time.
So I think it can be incredibly rewarding to run your own business. At the end, the buck stops with you.
Right.
You can make good money, but with great reward, what comes first?
Great risk, right?
So yeah, I mean, if one of my guys makes a mistake on a job, it doesn't cost them a penny.
Right.
I might be disappointed in them, and they might feel my disappointment.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it comes out of our pocket.
Right.
So that's a challenge. And when you run a small business, everything is your department.
Yeah.
You have so many hats to wear.
Yep.
You're working from sunup to sundown, pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And it's stressful, and it's challenging, especially starting out. And I remember this when I was young. My parents, being up at night,
Oh, yeah.
going over the books and
Yep.
the bids and whatever it may be that day. So I remember the struggles. Fortunately, now we're stable enough where we have somebody that handles all the finances, somebody
Right.
that handles the estimating, the design, the sales. We have a nursery manager, so that we're able to have all that taken care of by somebody with that hat. Whereas when you're starting out, my dad would have to go source his plants. He would have to
He did it all.
write up the bill, the estimate, the bill.
Yeah.
He'd be out there setting up the plants. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Just different time.
that's stressful, I think. But it's also exciting when you're watching this, your baby essentially
Yeah.
grow and take on whatever your capabilities and whatever you want it to be. it's kind of like the ultimate chess game with
Yeah.
very high stakes.
Right.
When I make a decision to change something in our organization, I don't do it quickly.
Yes.
I try to make it a calculated
Yeah.
decision, but it is fun to watch and adjust as you see whether, hey, that might not have been the best move, or hey, this is working. We should, go more in on this. So.
Well, one of the things that I've also observed about your business, just talking with you and just listening to what you say about how you run things, you guys tend to run really lean and mean. You're very cognizant of what labor you need. It probably has a direct impact on the labor you keep and the labor you're looking for. Talk a little bit, and again, this could be a 45-minute discussion. Talk about some of the labor issues that you've dealt with and you're dealing with now, and just kind of briefly talk about, what are some attributes or things that would make someone really successful at your company?
So I think I'm going to answer your last question first,
Okay.
because it's fresh on
Fresh
my
mind,
mind.
right.
So I think the things that'll make a person successful at my company will make you successful in life.
Right.
If you show up on time, if you listen, if you show that you have ambition, drive, those are all important attributes. I can teach you the horticulture. I can teach you how to build things that we build.
Yeah.
That comes with time. But take initiative. When I walk into the shop and I see that somebody's either left trash or left I came in over the weekend and somebody had left a bag of M-roots out in the in the pit. It's only a $150 bag of M-roots. Don't worry about it.
Right.
It's like, so somebody said, that's not important.
Right.
But that, if I took $150 out of their pocket, they'd think differently.
Correct.
So I think, treat whatever business you work for as your own, and you'll go far in life.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. That's, if you could get a room full of employees that had that mindset, man, what could you do with a business? Just
and the problem I see is that people get bored in a position too quickly. They think, well, I've been a crew member for a year. I need to be a foreman now, or I've been a foreman for a year. I need to be a salesman now. And the amount of time it takes to master something is much longer than 12 months, especially when you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people who are capable of, blowing past all those hurdles and being a salesman in 2 years or whatever. But I'm not willing to take somebody who doesn't know their trade or their craft and say, okay, you're the representation of my company. I'm going to send you out as my point guard to go meet with the clients.
Well, in your business, every job is unique. So you might work at a company like yours for a year, and if you're on 2 or 3 or 5 big projects, you might only be on 5 to 7 projects a year if they're big projects. There's no way you're ready for the next step, because those 5 projects are all unique to themselves, and you just need some time to sort of learn. Oh wow, that didn't work. That's more of how I learn. I think I learn the hard way sometimes more than the easy
I think
way.
I'm the same.
Wow.
And I think, a lot of people, when they come into work, they want to go through the motions, and you can't go through the motions and be successful. If you go through the motions, you're going to be a pawn your entire life. If you want to be more than that, you need to, ask questions, engage in what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
And instead of looking at Facebook all night, maybe read a book or
read a journal or something, right?
Or maybe if you're on Facebook, at least look at something that's related to what you're trying to do. If you want to be successful, it's not about punching the time card.
No.
It's about, what have I done that's made me better than the person next to me.
It's funny you say that, because I had a student about 7 years ago get really frustrated because I could identify a lot of plants. And he asked me in front of the whole class, he said, he told me, he said, you're incredibly frustrating. I said, in what way? That's kind of an odd thing for a student to say to a teacher. You're really frustrating. I said, why? He said, well, you just know all these plants. He said, how did you do that? And I said, well, several ways. I said, when my wife and I first met, we were dating, we went to Spring Grove Cemetery, and I studied trees while we held hands and walked around the park or walked around the cemetery. When I go hiking in the woods, I've got 2 or 3 identification keys with me. When I take a vacation, I go to a botanic garden or a garden center. And I said, it's not because I'm smarter than anybody else, it's just I was willing to put in more time than other people. That's the only real reason why I know what I know about plants.
Right.
So I think that's a good point. Let's kind of pivot our conversation and talk a little bit about landscape architecture and the design process. One of the things that has always impressed me when you come in and speak to my classes is you have a very clear procedure that you go through when you design a landscape. And I'm kind of a systems thinker, so I guess maybe that's why I connect with that, because if you work in systems, it's easier to kind of figure out where your systems fall apart. Talk a little bit about your thought process that you go through. So let's say I'm a new potential client. I approach you and say, Brandon, I've got this property, I'd like you to design it. Kind of walk through in broad strokes. What are the steps that you go through to kind of go through that process?
Yeah, so like you said earlier, every project's unique. So if a client comes to me and says, I want these things done, the first thing I'm saying is, okay, I need to write up a design proposal. I need to lay out the parameters of what we've agreed upon as our contract, so to speak, for how much time I'm going to spend and how much you're willing to pay me for my design.
Gotcha.
So that's the first thing, and it's not the most important thing, but I always tell people I can stay at home and not get paid. So it is important, nobody goes to work because they just love their work.
Right.
Very few people, I'm sure.
Maybe independently wealthy people.
Yeah, but most of us have to eat. So after I've laid that out, I'll say to the client, okay, here's the design proposal. If you agree to that, then I'll either get a survey executed if a survey is needed, and then that'll be X amount of dollars additionally. And I usually actually present that at the time with the design fee. Once that's been agreed upon, I'll go out and I'll get do an inventory and analysis. I'll see what's on the site, what needs to be removed, what needs to stay, what are the assets that we're working with, what are negative views, what are where are the drainage problems, how's the grade? Is the grade built up on the foundation? Do we need to come in and scrape off 20 years of mulch or whatnot? So I go through the inventory and analysis. Then I'll start I'll say you wanted an outdoor living room. I'll start laying out the space and say, okay, if the client said they'd like, and I always go back to my design proposal and I'll read that as I'm designing it, just to make sure I'm hitting on all those things, because one of the most important things in my mind that you can do is listen. If you listen to a client and they have little things that they say, and if you can pick up on those little things, they'll know that you listened, and then they want to work with you. Somebody who doesn't listen, it's like your client's time is very valuable. Everybody's time is valuable, but your client's time to them is more valuable than your time. So if they've spent the time talking to you and you haven't listened, you've showed them that you don't value their time. And so I'll go back through and I'll try to hit on those little things in the design, and then I'll present a concept plan to them, or multiple concepts depending on the scale of the project and what we're trying to achieve. And I'll ask them, I'll say, you can take elements from all these designs and you can create a mishmash, and tell me what you like about this, and I'll walk them through what my thoughts were while I designed this. And then once they've given me feedback, I'll go back and polish the design further. Once we have agreed that this is the design they'd like to see built, I'll go get my subs involved and we'll get pricing. And once I have a bid put together, I'll present the bid and hope that the client doesn't have a heart attack. And, and then we go from there.
Wow. But I like how you describe that process. There are distinct steps in the process. And even though the projects vary, I think, again, just one of the things that's really impressed me about you is just your ability to systemize that process, even though it's a creative, you don't think of a creative process being systemized, but you've applied enough of a system on it that you're not missing key stuff.
So the reason for that is because, in the business world, you're judged on production.
Yep.
Designers are, by their nature, the worst business people in the world. They want to design things until they're perfect.
Right.
If you can keep the design process more lineal, as opposed to circular,
Right.
A designer will get bogged down at
Yep.
every step just
Yep.
because it's not perfect yet and it's not perfect yet. So if you can try to push that through and set dates, say to a client, I'm 6 weeks out right now. I will have this design I will start the design in 6 weeks and I will have it to you in 8 weeks. Then that gives you benchmarks that you have to hit.
Yep.
And if you deliver on them, the client will love you. If you fall short, the client will love you a little less. And,
Right.
If you fall on your face,
They'll find somebody else.
yeah, exactly.
So the seat you sit on the bus is a little different than a typical just landscape architect, and I don't mean that to minimize a landscape architect. You not only are the landscape architect, you're also heavily involved in the install part of the process, whether you're monitoring a patio being installed or just out working with your own staff doing horticulture. What's a typical day look like for you? Maybe there is no typical day for you.
Days.
Chaos, maybe that's
Yeah,
what.
yeah.
I'm just
So my first thing I do is I get the crews situated. So I talk with my general manager. I say, okay, this is where we're going today. These are the changes that occurred overnight. I got an email from this client
Right.
or this client. We need to change this. So once the kids are off to school, the kids being my employees.
Right.
Once I have the kids off to school, then I start my day. I usually go, if we're in the build time of year,
Yeah.
which is now,
Right.
I'll go start the projects. So I'll check in on the jobs. I'll set up the plants. I put my hands on every
Yeah.
plant that we put in the ground.
Yeah.
Perennials included.
Wow.
Ground cover I don't really touch much.
Right. Don't blame you.
So I'll set up the jobs, and then I usually have a handful of meetings a day, whether that be with a subcontractor or with a client or a potential client. So I usually, during the busy season, I'll see my desk for about an hour a day.
Wow.
So, and then
How do you balance that? That's a lot. I mean, when I think through, I did some, not anything like you do, but I've done some landscape design work before, and I also ran crews. I had a hard time balancing those things. How do you do that? That's especially on the scale of something like this garden. That's got to be tough.
it's very difficult, especially this year.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you know, COVID's very good for landscape.
For sure, absolutely.
So it's been like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
Right when COVID hit, the phones went dead for about 2 weeks, and I was freaking out,
Right, I bet.
thinking, "What am I going to do?"
You and everybody else in the horticulture
yeah.
industry in Ohio.
And then all of a sudden,
It never stopped.
Yeah, and now I'm freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get all this done?
Right, right.
But yeah, it's very challenging to find balance, especially when you run your own business. Because I'm not only doing the design, I'm doing the sales, I'm doing the scheduling.
Yeah.
I'm reviewing invoices. I'm doing client relations and all that
Probably
stuff.
securing materials too, sometimes.
Yeah. Fortunately, in plant material, I don't have to secure a whole lot,
Good.
but we do like stone work, like
Yes.
natural stone outcroppings and that kind of stuff. I'll have to go tag the stuff down
Yeah.
at the stone yard, or if there's a specialty product, I need to call the supplier and
Fountain
make sure.
or a fixture. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to go source it, and
Wow.
yeah. So it's I had hair when I started doing this.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question. Talk a little bit about how you approach the concept of efficiency with your company.
So from a young age, myself, my brothers, and some of our employees who are still around from my dad's old days, we were drilled. Everything had to be done efficiently. I see, we run a nursery, and if I'm ever out at the nursery, I see other landscapers pull in, and there's 3 guys sitting in the truck
Right.
picking up one plant.
Right.
and I look at it and say, okay, well, they sold that plant for $100.
Right.
It's a $50 plant in theory, and
Right.
they sold it for $100, and they sent 3 guys over that are making, we'll just say, $15 an hour.
Right. Right.
So they've got $45 sitting in the truck. So now they've got $5 in profit
Right.
before they've planted in the ground.
Right.
So
not to mention all the lost time that they could have been
the
working on
gas,
site.
the-
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So I've seen the stupidity in that since I was a young kid.
Right.
So that's ingrained in
Yeah.
myself, and we try to ingrain that in our culture.
Yeah.
You don't really see our guys ever do that, and by having that in your culture, the guys who are here have been here for a long time. They teach the new guys.
Yeah.
And our employees understand that if we're profitable, they're profitable.
Yeah.
So when a guy comes in and he's not cutting it, we get rid of him quickly.
Yeah. You have to. I mean, that's.
Yeah, which is hard because finding people that want to work, the amount of effort it takes to put in a beautiful landscape,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
And if you want to be involved in that, you have to be willing to put in the sweat equity, and there aren't many people out there that want to do it, but the ones that do, they find it incredibly rewarding.
I drove past a property some of your staff were working on, I don't know, earlier this year, and just driving by, I was so impressed with the fact that, they had their truck in the driveway, there was a tarp underneath the truck, they were doing some maintenance work, and just the thought of, there's no sweeping up or minimal sweeping up. I mean, everything, it's just the whole process from the time you get on the job site until the time you leave, you can just see that there's a kind of a method to the madness with what you do, and I think that's commendable.
My dad created all those procedures, and then I documented them. My dad would orally deliver tongue lashings to anybody who wasn't following those procedures, and they might say, how was I supposed to know? So I've tried to document them and present them differently to the employees, and it's worked in some respects, and then in some areas you just got to say, hey, if you can't start picking it up, you got to go.
Yeah, you got to pick it up somewhere else.
Yeah.
Who are your primary clients? Who do you primarily work for?
We primarily do high-end residential.
Okay.
We try to stay inside the 275 loop.
Yeah.
Our biggest markets are Hyde Park and Indian Hill.
Yeah.
We also do have a large amount of clients in Wyoming, Glendale area, but I would say those are our major markets.
So when you think about the clients and the work that you all are doing, you do landscape design, install. Do you have do you do maintenance as well on some of the things you install?
Yeah, we prefer it that way.
Okay.
I always get sad when I see one of our landscapes get taken over by the grass cutters.
I'm sure.
Because then all the beautiful specimen plants end up being lollipopped, and it looks like Mario Brothers landscape.
Right.
So it does happen. There are people who don't want to pay the rate that we charge for maintenance, but by and large, I would say most landscapes that we install, we maintain.
So part of what I want folks to walk away from this interview kind of learning and knowing a little bit about is also just some of the pragmatic or practical aspects of working in this field. So talk a little bit about some of the equipment that you guys use, not just installing landscapes, some of the equipment you use as a landscape architect. Are you using AutoCAD? Do you use SketchUp? Just talk a little bit about some of those materials.
So yeah, for design, I do all my infield work. I'm using an iPad Pro, and then I use what's called Morpholio Trace, and that's very beneficial because I can take a base plan and I can drop a virtual piece of trace paper over it, and I can make notes in field.
Wow.
So that's tremendously helpful for me. And then I'm using AutoCAD with Land Effects as a plugin, which allows me to associate data with all of my plants.
Oh, wow.
So when I go to plant a oak tree, I've already said, okay, a 2-inch oak takes X amount of time to plant. I need this amount of M roots. I need this many plant tabs.
Wow.
And then I can push that directly into an Excel document And so when I have I can have a plan. When I did this project, I had a plan, and every one of these plants that's on this had that data associated with it. So when we finished the design, I was able to push that out and have my estimate generated very quickly because of that. Whereas this would have taken, my dad would have been with a pencil and a piece of paper, and he would have been, okay, this takes 20 minutes, and then he would have added up, and then he would have said, okay, let's double check it, and so this is
so technology's played a huge role in making that process
much more efficient,
accurate too, I would assume.
Oh yeah,
because I would make mistakes on a calculator.
Yes.
Excel tends not to, it's garbage in, garbage out on that.
It's usually, exactly, user error is the only way you're going to mistakes.
Right, exactly. What about some of the physical equipment? I'm assuming you guys have skid steers and dump trucks and things like that.
So we use Bobcat products primarily. We have 2 Bobcats in town, and we have 3 out at the farm, and a couple other skid steers out at the farm. We have mini excavator. We have various farm tractors. We use we have a mulch blower, which has been a little frustrating. It's in the shop again.
Oh, man.
So constant maintenance on equipment, and that's another thing. I like to drive home on with our employees. If we take care of it, it'll take care of us. It's really frustrating when you get to a job and the mulch blower is not working, and you've got 50 yards of mulch to blow.
And 4 people standing around.
Yeah. So you know what that means? There's 4 wheel barrels. Get at it.
Yeah, right.
So
Different ball game.
Yeah.
Well, last question I have for you, and it's kind of a open-ended, kind of a big question. 2 questions actually. So where do you think the landscape design industry is going overall? And then couched in that question is, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
So landscape design runs with the economy. At least in my facet of the business. If you're doing landscape design in regards to government work, which is what I used to do at my old job, it's pretty recession-proof to a certain extent. But when the economy tanks, so does landscape design. Fortunately for us, most of our clients are not recession-proof, but they're
a little more insulated.
They're insulated, correct. So we didn't have any layoffs during the Great Recession. Everybody worked 40 hours through the entire 40 hours plus through the entire recession. Which was great. We weren't getting some of the bigger projects that we were accustomed to, so it was more, let's enhance what we have. Just do a little planting here. So it was a lot more cocktail napkin sketches than it was big pool projects. But as to be expected, I think. As far as trends, right now everybody with the stay-at-home orders is, we're getting a lot of outdoor living areas.
I'll bet.
Pools, but more in volume. A lot of outdoor fireplaces, a lot of outdoor kitchens, a lot of pergola spaces, and a lot of that. And then very few people call and say, "Hey, I want to spend $100,000 on plantings." The plantings kind of fall in and around the structures, so it's important to be able to design these structures because that's how you sell plantings. You get a few people calling for, I want a perennial garden, or I want to enhance our foundation. We get a lot, but not many people are saying let's spend $100,000 on a new garden.
Well, I think that's a really good insight for people to hear that want to consider landscape architecture. I find, I'm over generalizing this statement, but I find that there's almost like 2 facets of landscape architecture. You got those real plant heavy people that are just all gardens, all plants, and then you've got people that are structures and hardscape. And it sounds to me like, from what you're saying, what you're seeing is the trend is, right now anyway, the plants are sort of ancillary to that hardscape element.
Yeah, and I think it's advantageous for somebody who's a plantsman to work with a landscape architect.
Definitely.
Because I'm a landscape architect, and I'll tell you right now, most landscape architects a lot of times, myself included, don't know enough about plants.
Yeah.
And so if you're a good plantsman,
Mm-hmm.
I would line yourself up with a landscape architect and work together on the
Mm-hmm.
visions. And that's a great way to really get to work on some awesome projects.
Mm-hmm.
Landscape architects are going to reel in the really big projects. Most people aren't calling the horticulturalist to say,
Right.
hey, I just bought this 10-acre estate, I need it
Right.
completely redone.
Right.
But if you can, ride on the coattails of the landscape architect, you can really make some beautiful gardens.
I learned pretty early on in my career. I thought I could be a good landscape designer. After doing some small, I think the largest landscape design job I did was maybe $45,000. I figured out pretty quickly I'm better with plants than I am design.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the students that I deal with, or people calling to come in the industry, it's just a different world.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to find somebody that's really good in both. I just think that's almost like a unicorn. There's just not a lot of those folks around. This has been great. I really appreciate you sharing.
No, it's
just
always a pleasure.
Candidly, feedback to people who are interested in the trade. You've hired a number of students that I've had in my class, and some have worked great, and some haven't worked great.
Yeah, it's
and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't for everybody. That's one thing that I appreciate about every person that's been part of this process. What I want students to get from this is to find their place in this field, or realize that this is not for them, that this would be a great hobby.
Yeah.
So go become a rich banker and hire Brandon Druffel to design your landscape.
There you go.
Brandon, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.